Hello everyone, welcome back to Study Room. In this video, we will be studying about speciation, that is how a species is formed from a pre-existing species maybe, or is it how it originated maybe. So we'll be seeing all these features of a species here in this video. Okay, so let us see what is speciation. Speciation is a process by which new species are formed. Okay, so here you can see this is a bird and these birds look very much alike, but they have certain differences. As you can see, the difference is in their beak, which may have actually been formed due to their feeding habits. So since they look very alike, okay, and they have certain very same features, same characteristics, so here we can say that they originated from the same species, but again, like they have a common ancestor, but they have formed into different species here, different species on the basis of they have developed these big beaks, new kind of beaks, and hence formed a new species due to their feeding habits, right? So let us see an illustration of a beetles, and we'll see here how species are formed, like explanation of speciation with the help of beetles. So here you can see a population of beetles is there, and gradually there is this geographical barrier or a river. Here we can see that there is a river which comes in between this beetle population, okay, and it is divided into two parts. Now these two beetle populations keep on growing and keep on reproducing independent of each other. Okay, they are not affected by each other, so they are doing this independently on either side of the river. So both the sides of the river have different habitats, right? Because they are growing independently and their habitat is different, so they adapt to their habitat differently. Here you can see that they are adapting into their habitat differently and they're becoming a different kind of beetles, and here also they are adapting to the habitat differently and they're developing into a different kind of population. So here we can say that two different species are formed, but they originated from the same species. So this species actually developed, and with gradual course of time it develops into two different population with with distinguishing characteristics. As you can see here, these beetles are generally green, like dull green, and they are very dull in color. And here you can see that these are very bright in colored beetles, with red colored beetles also, like light red color, maroon color, and even light green color. So these beetles actually are different. They have certain distinguishing features from each other, and that is why we can say that these two are different species which originated from the same species, but the speciation occurs due to the development of a geographical barrier, that is a river. Okay, next, what causes speciation? So there are certain factors which cause speciation. The first factor that we are talking about is geographical isolation. Geographical isolation means when a part of the population actually it gets isolated from the main population, and then it develops certain characteristics, adapting to its new habitat, and it becomes a new species. So here you can see it was a part of this population itself, but then gradually with course of time it became another species. It developed other characteristics, new characteristics, and hence it is a new species. So this is how new species getting formed. So this is how new species are getting formed here through geographical isolation with the passage of time. The next factor that we have is reproductive isolation. So reproductive isolation, what do we do here? Here the original population is actually divided by a geographical barrier, and the population grows, they grow independently of each other, and hence there is a reproductive isolation present here. Why? Because the individuals of this population, the individuals of this population cannot actually go and they mate with the individuals of this population, because these are a different species, and this becomes a different species due to certain characteristics that they develop with the passage of time due to this geographical barrier, and hence they won't be able to reproduce among themselves and produce fertile young ones. So that is why there is this reproductive isolation that is present here. This reproductive isolation gives rise to new species. This two species are formed, and hence we can term it as a factor for speciation. The next factor that we have is natural selection. Natural selection, as we all know, that it can result in organisms that are more likely to survive and reproduce, and may eventually lead to speciation, because the organisms need to develop new habits to actually cope up with the adverse conditions of the nature, and hence they develop new habits and new characteristics, due to which they form a new species. As we can see here, the ancestor bird with average beak size, and due to the natural selection, these bird species develop different kind of beaks based on their feeding habits, as we discussed in the first slide as well. So here they are developing different kind of beaks due to different kind of feeding habits, like the medium sized beak specialized for insect eating, the long sized beak specialized for wood pecking, and the short beak specialized for seed eating. So these are the three kind of beaks that are specialized, right? And hence new species are getting formed from the ancestor bird. So this was one of the experiments, or this was one of the observations that Darwin did. Okay, we all know about Charles Darwin, right? So what Darwin did, he also observed these birds which were known as finches. Okay, so he observed these birds, and he saw that these birds looked alike, but they had different beaks based on their feeding habits, and hence he concluded that this resulted due to natural selection, and hence this very very famous example is known as Darwin's finches. Okay, so this is a very famous example known as Darwin's finches, and this results due to natural selection. So the factor for speciation here we are studying is natural selection. The next cause, or the next factor for speciation that we can study, is genetic drift. As we know that genetic drift is the change in the frequency of an existing gene variant in a population, and it would cause rapid genetic change in the small population. This genetic change could lead to speciation. So here you can see that how the genetic drift is changing and is causing speciation. We have two kinds of beetles here. The first is green color and the other is yellow color. So here the green colored beetle are getting eaten up, and they are decreasing in population, and in resulting way as a result, yellow colored beetles are getting developed here. They are in more number. The yellow colored beetle, as a result, the yellow colored beetle are developing more in number, and hence there is a genetic drift that is caused here, which results in more number of population in the yellow beetle as compared to the green beetle, which is also a cause of speciation, right? So here we are telling that genetic drift is a cause of speciation. Now we'll be discussing the in-text question. What are the factors that could lead to the rise of a new species? We discussed so many factors. The first factor that we discussed was geographical barrier. The second was reproductive isolation, or geographical isolation also we can say. Next we have the natural selection, and the next we studied about genetic drift. So these were the four factors that could lead to the rise of a new species. The next question that we have is, will geographical isolation be a major factor in the speciation of a self-pollinating plant species? Why or why not? We can say that geographical isolation cannot be a major factor in the speciation of a self-pollinating species, plant species, because it does not have to look for plants for its process of reproduction to be carried out, and hence since it is independent of any other plant, hence the geographical isolation cannot be a major factor in the speciation of a self-pollinating plant species, right? So the plant is self-dependent. It can produce its own offspring on its own because it is a self-pollinating plant, right? So that is why geographical isolation cannot be a factor. Now, the next question that we have is, will geographical isolation be a major factor in the speciation of an organism that reproduces asexually? Why or why not? Geographical isolation cannot be a major factor in the speciation of a asexually reproducing organism, also because it does not require any other organism to carry out reproduction, and hence, since it is self dependent, okay, it does not require any other organism for its reproduction, and hence it can geographical isolation is not a major factor, because if a population is there and if it is getting isolated somewhere, so since this population is actually the individuals of this species is actually self dependent, and they can reproduce on their own, so this kind of reproduction actually doesn't is not affected by geographical isolation. So that is why geographical isolation will not be a major factor in the speciation of an organism that reproduces asexually. So that was all about this video about speciation. We studied the major factors, we studied what is speciation, and we also studied the major factors that are responsible for speciation. And we also discussed the in-text questions. That all about this video. Thank you so much.